All right, so we're gonna make our waffles. Uh, the first thing we're gonna do is split up our white wets and dries into individual bowls. So we're first gonna get our sourdough starter together, and we're gonna get 120 grams of that into our bowl of wets. This is a sourdough starter that's been going on for about 4 months. Uh, this gives it a nice sort of depth of flavor to our waffle. It also adds some sourness and will also help with the leavening agent. So after our 120 grams of sourdough starter, we're going to add our 1 cup of milk. Make sure our sourdough is completely done. We cover it with a towel to keep it and let air through without pests getting in, and we put a lid on top so it doesn't evaporate out. So a big thing I do with my milk is make sure that you measure it all the way to the top. What I've seen a lot of my students do is stop about there where you still have some room to go in. A cup is all the way to the top of the cup measuring cup. So we're going to add a cup in there. Next, we're going to add a single egg. We'll set that aside as we get our butter because we need to melt our butter. So we're going to weigh it into our pan before we get it on to start it to melt. We're going to get our 42 grams of butter together. We'll get that on the heat on a low heat. We don't want to brown this. We just want to melt it. Next, we're going to chop our herbs. Uh, Instead of getting our dries together, just so we can get our cutting board out of the way. Anything we can get out of the way and don't need anymore always helps us out and keep together and clean and make it easier so at the end of our project we don't have a giant cluttered mess. All right, so first thing I'm going to do is just clean up my cutting board a little bit. Then we're going to take my sage leaves and line them up, and I'm going to take off those little bits of stem left. We don't want that tough stem inside of our waffle. We just want the nice flavors of our sage. For our rosemary, you're going to put your fingers around and or drag it down the stem, and all those leaves should come right off. Again, we do not want that stem. That stem is going to be very, very tough, and we'll get, sticky splinters in our tongue whenever we eat our rosemary, our raw waffles. We're just going to give these a nice rough chop. We want as much surface area as possible. We want to get all those aromatics and oils out into our batter. Just run some passes through, check the butter, make sure it's not browning. We'll add that right into our wets. right, my butter's almost melted. I'm just going to turn off the heat to make sure that it does not brown and let it melt the rest of the way on just some residual heat. Now we'll start getting our dries together. First, we're going to do 120 grams of all-purpose flour, or 120 grams of flour. Then we're going to add 12 grams of sugar, give it a little bit of sweetness. Then we're going to add 10 grams of baking powder. And the baking powder, besides adding leavening agent, will also help cut down on the sourness of the sourdough starter because the sodium bicarbonate or the baking soda that's in our baking powder will actually react with some of that lactic acid inside of our sourdough starter and keep it from being too sour. And we're going to add about a half teaspoon of salt, a half teaspoon of salt there. All right. Now we're going to start getting everything into one bowl. So we're going to start and just mix all of our dries together so it's nice and evenly incorporated, no big lumps. We don't want a lumpy dough. Then we're going to whisk together our eggs and milk and sourdough starter. We're going to slowly drizzle in the butter, making sure not to add it too fast because we don't want to scramble. That is hot butter. We don't want to scramble those eggs. Just make sure it's nice and well incorporated. Now we're just going to add everything into our dries while stirring. Add a little bit at a time, keep incorporating it. This will help there be less lumps when we get to the end. Versus if you added all of it, it's a lot higher chance of there being quite a few lumps in there. Get all that lovely, lovely wet sourdough starter and herbs out of there. We're going to get a good mix, a good whisk, make sure everything's well incorporated. Then we're going to pour this into a quart container and put it in the fridge overnight. That will allow the herbs and the sourdough starter to really work and use the flavors, so it'll be a nice and savory waffle. And just clean it up a little bit, just kind of stack in my pans. There's our waffle mixture. Notice it's nice and smooth, no real lumps, clumps, or bumps. Just cover it and put it in the fridge for later.